an eternal being who has conquered time itself, the source of all monsters. This is how Fi defines Demise during the final battle in the English version of Skyward Sword. The original Japanese text of this exact definition, however, is considerably more complex, revealing Demise as not merely the source of monsters, but as the origin of a profound Japanese concept called Ma, something that extends far beyond what any translation like monsters or evil could ever convey. In the context of The Legend of Zelda, Ma applies an incredible amount of depth to the definition of evil in the series, and is also the very same Japanese character that appears in the Japanese title for the Master Sword, Taima no Tsurugi. We have explored nuance-heavy Japanese terms like gloom and malice on the channel in the past, but Ma serves as an overarching concept that can encompass them all. It carries layers of unique symbolic significance, with tons to unpack regarding new perspectives on what the Master Sword's glow embodies, particularly when in the presence of evil, along with a potential explanation for why Ganondorf turns to stone after being impaled by it in The Wind Waker. While this video analyzes the Japanese versions of the Zelda series, it's not intended as a critique of the official English localizers. Instead, I will provide alternative translations and explanations to offer new or deeper perspectives on text or terminology that do not seamlessly transfer to English, a luxury that the official localizers did not have. It's also worth noting that while the series draws heavily from Japanese culture and religion, it is not always directly a one-to-one parallel. Several of these new insights we'll discuss are also drawn from Tears of the Kingdom's official Japanese exclusive masterworks, a supplementary book filled with new lore, artwork, and behind-the-scenes details about Tears of the Kingdom. Combining these revelations with an analysis of the Japanese version of the games uncovers how the immense significance of Demise and Ma shapes the conflicts in the series and unravels the true nature of Zelda's sealing power, Raru's light power, and the intricate balance of light and darkness woven into Hyrule's history. Before analysing the Japanese title of the Master Sword, let's begin by addressing the elephant in the room. What exactly does Fi mean when they state that Demise is the origin of Ma? In its broader meaning, the concept of Ma isn't simply about overt evil, it's a more insidious force that preys on the mind and heart, gnawing at the spirit through fear, confusion, and self-deception. It's a kind of force that latches onto the vulnerable parts of one's kokoro, a Japanese concept that we'll explore the significance of in Zelda in a moment, exploiting one's insecurities and disrupting the internal balance of the spirit. In Buddhism, Ma is also called Mara, a force that kills spiritual progress. It represents anything that obstructs enlightenment, feeding on earthly desires, illusions, and attachments. Unlike external evils, Ma arises internally from our deepest fears. It can emerge from one's thoughts, emotions, and desires, which in Japanese is also called shinen, another massively significant term related to Demise that I've covered before. Ma is generally classified into 4 types. There's Bonno Ma, the Ma of human desires manifesting as greed, anger, and ignorance. There's Onma, suffering tied to physical attachment, leading to pain and despair. Shima, the Ma of death, embodying existential dread. And finally, there's Tenma, a tempter, luring with worldly pleasures to derail spiritual growth. What's truly terrifying, and perhaps most significant to the stories in The Legend of Zelda, is that Ma can corrupt even noble deeds and good intentions. In Zen Buddhist teachings, some stories illustrate how devotion itself can become a form of attachment, becoming a tool for Ma to exploit. One such story tells of a monk who became overly attached to the golden statue and relics that were part of his worship. His master warned him that this attachment could invite Ma, cautioning that even the purest of intentions can be twisted if one becomes too fixated on something, even if it's something sacred. According to Fi in Skyward Sword, Demise represents the foundation of all Ma in the world. With this tale of the overly devoted monk in mind, it becomes somewhat terrifying to realize how the Triforce, an artifact that grants any wish and manifests desires into reality, could also play into and mirror the events of the monk's story. The early foundational myths in Hyrule's lore show that the people of Hyrule were indeed deeply devoted to worshipping the Triforce, seeing it as the cornerstone of their world, a source of divine power that holds their reality together. But what if it is this very devotion that is the origin of the root of all evil? Considering Demise's ultimate goal is to claim the Triforce, could it be possible that the entity of Demise himself originated from, or is at least affiliated with, an excessive attachment people developed towards the Triforce? Just as the monk's attachment to his relics invited Ma in the story, it wouldn't be a stretch at all to consider that perhaps the people of early Hyrule, in their profound worship of the Triforce, unknowingly gave rise to a being like Demise, born from desires and attachments. The Triforce is, in essence, interwoven into the fabric of Hyrule's very existence. It is a key component that sustains the world. Yet, paradoxically, it may also be the very source from which all Ma and darkness originate. In striving for power, wisdom, or even pure intentions, those who were perhaps overly devoted to the sacred relic might have unknowingly brought Ma into the world. When someone succumbs to Ma, it exploits the vulnerabilities in their heart and spirit, latching onto their fears, insecurities, and desires. It distorts their perception, leading them to cling to rationalizations that justify their actions or failures, no matter how flawed those justifications may be. Ma seeks to invade the kokoro, the core of a person's spirit, and break it down. In Japanese culture, the kokoro embodies the essence of one's being, where emotions, thoughts, and spirit converge. Acting as the bridge between body and soul, it is where a person's true self resides. As both the seat of the soul and the source of inner strength, it aligns closely with the spirit of the hero, which defines Link, a concept I've explored previously on the channel. Strengthening one's kokoro is what enables one to overcome Ma. A strong kokoro fosters spiritual resilience, allowing individuals to face challenges with courage, while a weakened one leaves them vulnerable to invading negative influences and the darkness that is Ma. Mirroring this concept are the Silent Realms in Skyward Sword. These are ethereal landscapes that strip Link of his weapons and force him to rely solely on his spiritual resolve. The Silent Realms are not trials consisting of tests of physical strength, but are domains of the spirit that specifically bolster his kokoro, as Fi explains in the Japanese version of the game. In other words, they represent a kind of necessary spiritual practice that Link must overcome to reinforce any weaknesses that Ma could seek to exploit. The true extent to which Ma can influence one with a non-fortified kokoro in Zelda can be witnessed the moment Link descends to the ancient surface for the first time, concluding the game's prologue. There, he encounters the same sealing spike that the goddess Hylia used to imprison the literal origin of all Ma in the past. The spike radiates a mysterious and oppressive energy, its aura so overwhelming that it distorts Link's vision and leaves him disorientated, as if it's invading his senses and reaching into the depths of his soul. If even the faint trickle of Ma seeping from the sealing spike can affect Link so profoundly, it's terrifying to imagine the sheer devastation that an unsealed Demise could unleash upon him in his undeveloped state. Without the resilience gained from his trials in the Silence Realms, Link, like any other human, is utterly helpless to the corruptive force emanating from this ancient evil as well. Towards the end of his journey, and after clearing all Silence Realms, Link gains the inner fortitude to not only approach the sealing spike unaffected, but even to confront the very source of Ma itself one-on-one. This might explain why the final battle with Demise unfolds in such a tranquil, boundless expanse. If we apply the understanding of the concepts we've explored so far, the serene, infinite battlefield seems to reflect Link's fortified inner state. Here, the clash between Link, the hero, and Demise, the Demon King, is much more than just a physical fight. It's Kokoro versus Ma, a battle between Link's essence and the relentless darkness that seeks to challenge it. During their battle, Fi reveals that, according to legend, Demise's form changes based on who is perceiving him. Recall what I mentioned earlier about how Ma can manifest from and take the form of one's desires or worldly attachments, and how there are several classifications of this evil as well. Drawing from this notion as the literal embodiment of all the classifications, the entity of Demise too manifests in ways that specifically torment each observer, reflecting the darkness and fears lurking within their hearts. I think it's also worth considering that Demise doesn't merely take on a form that reflects someone's terror. His very existence inherently embodies their fear, a force that seeks to exploit vulnerability as the origin of all Ma and all spiritual evil in existence. With this understanding of Ma in mind, we can begin to uncover the extent to which this concept is woven into countless elements of the Zelda universe. When Ma is combined with certain Japanese characters, the word that forms can also take on even broader meanings and concepts. A very curious example includes the Bargainer statues in Tears of the Kingdom, Majora's Mask's final transformation, and Vati's first demonic form, which all share the same title of Majin, a term that, to put it briefly, can be explained as an abstract or mysterious humanoid or sorcerer that possesses a kind of supernatural power that transcends beyond that of regular people. In Japanese mythology, there are various terms for different kinds of demons, but the Japanese term used to describe many of the monsters and demons aligned with evil forces in the Zelda series, Mamono, contains the same character, Ma, that Fi describes Demise as the source of. While Mamono translates to demonic beings or creatures born of Ma, according to traditional Japanese definitions, it can also refer to entities that corrupt or disturb people's hearts and minds. All Mamono, or demons, within the series are, in the Japanese version, explicitly mentioned to be a part of the Mazoku, a Japanese term that can be understood as meaning the demon tribe or the clan of Ma. Leaders of the Mazoku include Demise and Ganondorf, two of the most iconic villains in the Legend of Zelda series. Both bear the title Mao, a title that translates to King of Ma. Interestingly, the term Mao can also refer to figures that appear in Abrahamic religions, but there are also origins linked to Buddhist teachings. In these contexts, Mao represents entities that dwell in what's called the desire realm, a domain filled with earthly attachments and desires that trap beings in cycles of suffering and illusion. While this is a nuanced topic that, to be honest, deserves its own video, it's worth noting how closely this idea aligns with the themes of corruption and spiritual imbalance we see in The Legend of Zelda. In Ocarina of Time, when Ganondorf enters the Sacred Realm in pursuit of the Triforce, his malice and greed corrupt it, transforming it into the Evil Realm. In Japanese, the term used for Evil Realm is Makai, a word that, once again, contains the character Ma. The term Makai is often translated as Demon Realm or Realm of Darkness, and traditionally refers to a world of malevolent beings or demons. In Buddhist cosmology, Makai is sometimes associated with the upper levels of the realm of desire as well, and is associated with mysterious or fearsome places tied to legends of spirits, curses, and the supernatural. In some fantasy fiction, Makai is often depicted as a distinct, otherworldly realm inhabited by demons, monsters, or magical beings, standing in opposition to realms like the human world or celestial heavens. This blend of religious, cultural, and fantastical meanings makes the Sacred Realm's transformation into a Makai even the more curious. What's more is that Ganondorf's title in The Wind Waker, a game set in a timeline branching from Ocarina of Time, is Makai no Teo, meaning Emperor of Makai. This title is a connection to his rule over what the Sacred Realm became in Ocarina of Time, a corrupted domain shaped by his malice and greed, a place warped by desire, tainted by illusion, and ruled by the destructive force of Ma. So we've established that one way to fight against Ma is to possess a strong kokoro. But in The Legend of Zelda, spiritual fortitude isn't the only weapon that proves effective against this persuasive darkness. This brings us to two of the series' most iconic defenses against it, Zelda's Sealing Power and the Master Sword. On page 385 of Tears of the Kingdom's official masterworks, it's explained that Zelda's sealing power shares a deep connection with the light and time powers of Rauru and Sonia. While Raru's power is explicitly described as the power of light, the term used in the original Japanese version of the game is exceedingly unique. His light power is referred to as Hama, a particular and significant term that can be loosely understood as a form of exorcism to quite literally break Ma. It does directly tie into a very particular method of dispelling or purifying darkness, which we'll get into in a moment. But what makes this even more fascinating is that so far, Tears of the Kingdom's Rauru is the only character in the series whose powers are explicitly labeled with this term. In the Messages from an Ancient Era quest in Tears of the Kingdom, where Link traverses the skies to uncover stone tablets detailing Raru's reign, it's revealed that Rauru and Sonia built the Shrines of Light to ward off and contain monsters during the early days of their kingdom. However, now that we've delved into the deeper meaning of Ma, it becomes clear that the evil or monsters they sought to target likely went far beyond just physical threats. These Shrines of Light, which Rauru created to cleanse and purify darkness, are referred to in the Japanese version of the game as Shrines of Hama. This terminology mirrors the name given to Raru's unique power, a force specifically designed to purify Ma. According to page 382 of Masterworks, Rauru and Sonia built these shrines to create a peaceful kingdom where all could live harmoniously. The book reveals reveals that they traveled to locations with a strong presence of Ma, places they called demon gates. In these places, they combined their powers to create the shrines. Rauru uses his hammer power to purify the surrounding Ma, while Sonia utilizes her time magic to freeze the purified energy within stones. Their combined efforts infused the shrines with the power to cleanse and protect against the invading darkness, scattering these sanctuaries across Hyrule in what the book calls the Pilgrimage of Purification. To elaborate, Hammer can be understood in Buddhism as the process of eradicating Ma. Specifically, it refers to overcoming one's bonno, a culturally significant term that is one of the 4 types of Ma I mentioned at the beginning of the video that broadly encompass the corruptive thoughts and desires rooted in the heart, or kokoro. This concept might shed light on a key moment during the imprisoning war. When Rauru makes his ultimate sacrifice to seal Ganondorf, the Demon King utters these words, "You bind my heart." What Ganondorf truly means is that Rauru's power is binding his bonno, the polluted earthly desires that fuel his very being. Ganondorf, as the Demon King, is the embodiment of bonno, and at the same time is consumed by it, by his earthly attachments and ambitions. For someone like a Demon King, whose very essence is intertwined with Ma, binding their bonno would significantly hinder their strength and influence. While Rauru achieved a formidable feat by restraining Ganondorf for an extraordinary amount of time, he couldn't neutralize or destroy the Demon King's power entirely, despite wielding the power of Hama and even sacrificing his very essence. Ganondorf's strength is undeniable, but there might be another reason why Rauru couldn't fully eliminate him, an explanation that lies within the very nature of Hama itself. In general, Hama is used to dispel or purify negative forces, evil energy, malevolent intentions, or harmful spiritual influences. However, it often focuses on eradicating these external manifestations of Ma, such as the obstacles or corruptive energies they emit, rather than directly targeting the core or origin of the entity embodying them. With that said, Hama can absolutely be effective on the source itself, and should weaken it. I believe there is some connection to be made here regarding why Rauru's power was effective at restraining Ganondorf, but fell short of destroying him, likely because Hama may not have the capability to extinguish the root of Ma when it resides so deeply within an individual like a Demon King. If remnants of Rauru's power persists within Zelda's abilities throughout the series, it would make sense why Zelda's light power in Ocarina of Time was only able to stun Ganon rather than destroy him entirely, since, as a Demon King, Ganon is the source of the corruption, not merely its manifestation. This would also explain why sacred weapons such as the light arrows frequently stun sources of evil rather than vanquishing them outright. Instead, they are specifically required to deliver the killing blow on enemies like Dark Beast Ganon in Breath of the Wild. This entity is essentially a phantom, a kind of spectre that originates from a very particular type of Ma, a concept I've explored in detail in several of my previous videos. While the light arrows are not explicitly referred to as Hama in the Japanese version of the game, the description of their purpose closely aligns with the term's meaning. The Bow of Light is described as a powerful weapon against evil, and is said to possess the ability to chastise Ma specifically. Interestingly, this concept mirrors a real-world counterpart in Japan, the Hamaya, or Hama arrows. Much like the light arrows in Breath of the Wild, these sacred arrows are not designed to harm a physical target per se. Instead, they are used to break and purify negative forces, such as evil spirits, ill intent, or even the evil mind emitted by an obstacle, rather than directly targeting the root entity itself. This brings us to Tears of the Kingdom, which unveils the true source of evil from which Calamity Ganon originates, in the depths beneath Hyrule Castle. Alongside this revelation comes the focus on the sole weapon capable of destroying such an overwhelming evil, the Master Sword. Infused with the sacred flames associated with the golden goddesses of creation, and blessed with Hylia's divine power through their reincarnation as Zelda, the Master Sword has been dubbed as the Blade of Evil's Bane and the Sword that Seals the Darkness. These titles are both interpretations of the same original Japanese name, Taima no Tsurugi. The character Tai, when combined with Ma, refers to the eradication, extermination, or complete elimination of all types of Ma. While the term Taima has more recently appeared in modern fantasy stories, its essence ties directly to a Buddhist concept known as Taiji, which describes the act of forcing someone to renounce their worldly desires, or bonno, a term we discussed earlier that refers to negative emotions such as greed, anger, and ignorance that cloud the mind and hinder spiritual enlightenment. Despite some inconsistencies, the Master Sword's glow remains a radiant hue that manifests in the presence of great evil. In Twilight Princess, it shimmers with light to dispel the corrupted twilight after being infused with the power of the souls. In The Wind Waker, its glow is awakened through the sage's blessing, while in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, the sword's aura intensifies when confronted with malice or gloom, and in Breath of the Wild specifically, the glow can become a permanent feature after Link conquers the Trial of the Sword. When the Zelda of Skyward Sword, the incarnation of Hylia herself, blesses the blade, it becomes imbued with the power of Taima, awakening the sword's iconic glow, and at the same time unlocks the ability to eradicate or directly influence Ma at its very core. With the glow of the blade activated, the Master Sword likely inflicts damage to evil entities on a much deeper level compared to regular weapons. Empowered with Taima, the blade doesn't just cut flesh, it cuts into the very essence of Ma, severing the corrupt desires and illusions that fuel its existence. In essence, the Master Sword becomes a weapon capable of targeting not only the body of evil entities, but also the kokoro, the heart or spirit, where bonno, the root of Ma, resides. This would explain why the Master Sword is so frequently used to deliver the final blow against sources of Ma like Ganondorf, as the blade contains spiritual potency required to counteract malevolence at its source. Ganondorf's character in The Wind Waker is driven by a longing for a world that no longer exists, a desire for the winds of Hyrule's past. This deep yearning, perhaps rooted in loss and regret, would, according to Japanese folklore, feed into Ma, which would only corrupt him further. This may explain why, when Link thrusts the fully powered Master Sword into Ganondorf's skull, delivering the final strike, it's almost as if it appears to sever the very bond between his spirit and body. In other words, the Master Sword's Taima power likely doesn't just destroy his physical form, it confronts and eliminates the very kokoro or spirit consumed by his attachment to a lost era, turning his ambitions and ultimately his body itself to stone. It's as though the blade, the Taima, eradicates the bonno that fueled his existence, leaving behind nothing but a lifeless shell, immobilized and devoid of the desires and illusions that once fueled and defined him. We see an effect to a similar extent in Twilight Princess, where, after being struck through the chest by the Master Sword during the conclusive battle, Ganondorf remains standing, but this time he is not turned to stone, but seemingly frozen in place. It's almost as though the blade has stripped him of everything, leaving him hollow and lifeless of the force that once drove him. The question remains though, why in Ocarina of Time did the sages choose to seal Ganon away rather than having Link eliminate him outright using the power of Taima imbued in the Master Sword? Tears of the Kingdom revealed that the Master Sword does have its limitations. Certain types of darkness, like the power of gloom, were beyond its ability to repel until Zelda's sacrifice imbued it with a new strength. Could something similar have been at play in Ocarina of Time? Well, in The Legend of Zelda, if an entity is directly tied to an external factor, such as an active Triforce piece for example, it seems that some physical forms of Ma are difficult to destroy permanently. In Japanese culture, entities of Ma are often caught in the cycle of samsara, where their karma binds them to continuous rebirth, a concept directly referenced by Demise in the Japanese version of Skyward Sword. This cycle reflects endless suffering and an inability to attain enlightenment. When no external force sustains an entity of Ma, just like when Ganondorf no longer has the Triforce of Power in The Wind Waker, the Master Sword is able to sever his existence completely. His demons, known as Mamono, or creatures of Ma, belong to the Mazoku, which can be understood as meaning the demon tribe. In the Japanese version of The Wind Waker, the Master Sword's immense power is said to have been strong enough to bind the Mazoku, keeping them dormant in the depths of the Great Sea. The Master Sword's sealing power is likely an extension of its Taima ability. It purifies and weakens Ma enough to allow long-term binding when necessary. This brings us back to Skyward Sword, where the Master Sword displays a similar sealing power, arguably on an even grander scale. As the source of all Ma, Demise is not merely the embodiment of corrupted desires, but the primal force that devours the inner self and warps the essence of one's existence. When Link wields the Master Sword and the power of Taima to defy him, it becomes more than a divine reckoning. It strikes at the very core of Demise's being and abolishes his corruptive, influential essence. This is where Ganondorf's connection to Demise manifests, not as a direct reincarnation, but through the overwhelming volume of Ma classifications he embodies when he awakens as a Demon King. However, Taima severs one's Bonno, therefore a Demon King erased by it entirely should not reincarnate. While an entity of Ma can be reborn if its karmic ties remain, Taima doesn't just kill, it removes the karmic bond of the spirit entirely.